hoping this is the year Scott Frost becomes the UCF Scott Frost as opposed to the Nebraska Scott Frost of the past couple of years, because, for sure, the first year you expect some struggles. I thought they would start to take off. I thought he would be perfect for that, and he may still be, but it's kind of concerning, just even like losing J.D. Spielman and things like that, where you're missing the positive signs that I absolutely expected. I called him Urban Meyer 2.0 like 2 years ago.
Yeah, getting kids to go and play in Lincoln, Nebraska. Tommy Frazier's not walking through that door, So, it's just it's a little bit of a tough thing, I think, because the recruiting base, when they were a Big 12 team, they could go into Texas and get a few guys, because then they could say, well, we're going to play most of the schools here in the state of Texas. You'll get to see them play or whatever. But, and they more than held their own in that conference up until, leaving it. And it's kind of been the Penn State effect. They joined the big conference, and it just hasn't materialized maybe the way that they thought it would. Been through a couple coaches already since joining the conference. And, I just think when you look at it, uphill battle, but not one that they can't win. I mean, Iowa's had success regardless of the controversy that's going on now. Wisconsin, obviously, kind of a similar model, maybe a little bit more entrenched in recruiting kids from the Midwest. And I think Nebraska's got a skew more toward Chicago and those areas that there's population. St. Louis, Ohio State's recruiting the heck out of St. Louis right now, and that's not, too far. I mean, it's probably 6 hours, 5-6 hours, I bet, over to Omaha, but and to Lincoln. But I know the Buckeyes are playing them this year. Isn't that right, Tony? At home? Does that sound right? Yeah. So we'll get another up close vantage point with them this year, and theoretically. And I agree with you. I think it's time that they've got a veteran quarterback. It kills them that Spielman, who's a difference maker, is walking away from that program. And his adopted dad is Rick Spielman, the general manager of the Minnesota Vikings. It makes you wonder if maybe he would go play at Minnesota or, something along those lines. But haven't heard anything in that regard. I'm not sure I've heard where he's going, and if he wants to enroll, or get started, it's time. Although I think he had some personal things he was also trying to work through as well.
Yeah, he had gone home to Minnesota sometime in the last, prior to COVID, sometime during workouts after the season, had gone back to home in Minnesota. So you would think PJ Fleck would be on that trail. You would think. Tommy Frazier's not walking through that door, but Adrian Martinez was already in the room, and most people thought that he was going to be good enough. He accounted for 25 touchdowns the year before. He threw 3 touchdowns in their final 7 games last year. Tony, to your point, they got off to the rough start in Scott Frost's first season with 6 consecutive losses, but over the final 6 games, they went 4-2. Last second loss, final kick to Iowa, last play of the game, took the Buckeyes to the wire, 36-31 game in Columbus. So they're losing to 2 top teams, especially Ohio State, a top 3 to 5 team in the nation. And they were starting to really look like they turned the corner. I almost liken Scott Frost to a lesser degree of a Jim Harbaugh, coming home, success on the field as a big-time player, also in the coaching ranks, had turned around a program in Frost's case, in Harbaugh's multiple programs, and it just seemed like the perfect fit. He's going to have all the cachet, and the recruits are going to be attracted to him, and it's going to get off to a great start. And if anything, Steve, you mentioned the success at Wisconsin and Iowa, despite the high-caliber players being recruited there. Nebraska, even under Mike Riley, out-recruited, if you believe in the rankings, Iowa and Wisconsin.
Yeah, and you
get it done on the field.
And you also have Minnesota now as a force in that division too. They could be a top 25 team for years to come with PJ Fleck kind of entrenched there. If that is his final, well, he's so young, I expect he'll probably take another job or 2 before he's retiring. And that's not even meant as a shot at him, because I know people think he's kind of quirky and all that. But you can't argue with the success that they had. I mean, they handed Penn State their first loss last year, isn't that right? And I think it was two 8-0 teams were playing each other there. And then they dropped the ball a couple times there at the end of the regular season, but they came back and had a great bowl win. And, the quarterback, Tony, I saw one of the tweets you had there that maybe we don't think too much about their quarterback or haven't said enough about their quarterback, Tanner Morgan, tremendous player. And, maybe he doesn't get the credit he deserved for pulling them through some tight games last year. Going to hurt not having Antoine Winfield Jr. there. My goodness, what a difference maker he was. Didn't he have 2 picks in that Penn State game, I think, and one at the end to seal it? And, and he made a play, and I don't know which game it was, but it was just an amazing interception. It might have been that Penn State game. But a lot of Buckeye fans, as that year was unfolded, were like, why isn't he at Ohio State? And, you think about it, Antoine Winfield Senior, went there in the late 90s from Akron Garfield, and there's still family, from what I understand, in the Akron area. But I don't think Ohio State really pursued him all that closely. I want to say Antoine did play with Minnesota for a while, but I think he was living in Dallas or in Texas when the son was being recruited. And for whatever reason, Ohio State, he may not have fit the mold maybe as a big corner because I don't think he's that big of a guy. But, man, did he live up to everything his dad was all about as a college player, no doubt.
He did camp at Ohio State looking for an offer because I was standing over Antoine Winfield Senior's shoulder on the sideline inside the WAC when Antoine Winfield was working out junior, and you could see his dad wanted that offer, and it just I assume it just comes down to he's 5'8", and he would have had to have looked exactly like his dad, but even then they're I assume looking at him as a safety, and now it doesn't really necessarily work out for him. I think Antoine Winfield, you look at Ohio State's defense now, Antoine Winfield Senior would have been the perfect slot corner. He would have, what Sean Wade did last year, Antoine Winfield would be made for that. But Senior, I mean, they could have used a good safety the last few years to play alongside Jordan Fuller, and to me it just came down to height, and it just didn't fit that. Didn't meet the requirements. It was like a ride at Kings Island or something.
Yep, I have 3 really quick Antoine Winfield Senior stories. He was the very first player that I called on the telephone who told me he was going to Ohio State. And either it was me or Bill Kerr, we were working for separate outfits at that time, broke the news of that in 1994. He's the very first player who basically told me to report that he had committed to Ohio State, which I thought that was pretty cool. 2, in 1998, he was one of, if not the best defensive back in all of college football. And I was working with Jeff Rapp at Buckeye Sports Bulletin, and Jeff had gotten up at the press box. They're playing Minnesota to go get a hot dog or a Coke, and he comes back and notes that Minnesota has scored a touchdown. And he says, well, how the heck did that happen? And Minnesota was, probably 5-5 type team back then in 98. And I said, well, it's the strangest thing, Jeff. They sent Johnson on a go pattern down the right sideline. He got behind Antoine Winfield and caught the ball in stride and went for a 60-yard touchdown. And we looked at each other and said, that's the only time that's ever happened in 4 years. And he missed. Jeff blinked and he missed it. And then the third one was at West Virginia, the first game of the 1998 season. West Virginia had recruits at the game. It was a Saturday night game on CBS. And Ohio State won the game 34-17, was preseason number 1 ranked team in the country with Katzenmoyer, Winfield, Boston, Jermaine, Partridge, and a Pear Tree, a really good team. And so the game's over, and they conduct the interviews in the weight room, which is, at that point, it was field level in the end zone, off the visiting locker room. And you could see over to the West Virginia side where they were doing some interviews, and their players are coming and going over on the other side of the room. And their recruits slowly start to gravitate over where they're not supposed to be to the Ohio State side of the room. And one of the kids who was there on an unofficial visit to watch the game, when Antoine Winfield's interview was over, he goes, Antoine, you're the best. And Antoine Winfield flashed him that smile and said, "Gee, thanks, dog." just a genuine moment, genuine dude, and great player. Played a long time in the NFL. Got swindled out of some money. I know that by a former Ohio State wrestler who fashioned himself as a financial, whiz bang guy, and took him for some money. And I don't know. Now his son's going to make millions of dollars playing football.
And won the Thorpe Award without an interception.
Didn't need it. They didn't throw his way, except that one time in Minnesota.
Best tackler I've ever seen in football.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Great run support corner. Just amazing.
Folks, where do you get this analysis? Where does this happen? You got Steve Hill.
Well, we have to talk about guys who played in 1997 because no one's playing right now. So,
hey, I'll do this all day. Sure, we can do this.